Okay, good everyone. Welcome again to biology class with Mr. Francis. In the previous video, we talked about reproduction in plants, and we saw the various type of flowers, and we also talk about ovaries. We talk about placentation. So in this topic today, we're going to look at pollination. So that's what we're going to discuss in today's topic. So talking about pollination. And under this topic, we're going to look at the definition of pollination in plants. We're going to look at features of self and cross-pollinated flowers. And we're going to look at the agents of pollination. So these are the subtopics we're going to look or discuss in this particular video. So at the end of this video, every learner should be able to define pollination, how pollination occurs in plants, and be able to give us features of self-pollinated flowers or cross-pollinated flowers, and at least list some agents of pollination. Alright, let's move on to the next slide. Now let's look at the definition of pollination. Now, pollination can be defined as a transfer of matured pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the mature stigma of the same or another flower of the same plant, or another plant that is closely related. So this is transfer of pollen grains. And don't forget that I told you in the last class that pollen grains, as we discussed earlier, represents the male sex gamete of the plants. So the pollen grain represents the male sex gamete of the plants, and it is found enclosed in the anther of the flower. And the anther is the male reproductive part of every plant, of every flower rather. And the stigma represents the female reproductive part of the flower. And the stigma, we have the ovary and the ovule at the base of it. So pollination is the transfer of this pollen grain, which is the male sex gamete, from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower, or another flower of the same plant, or a plant that is closely related. Alright, so the point here is that both plants must be closely related, or they must be the same for pollination to take place. Alright.
Sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Angiosperm plants propagate by means of sexual reproduction. A look at the flower shows the various floral parts. When the pollen is matured, the anthers open, releasing them. The pollen is fine and powdery like golden dust. In self-pollinated flower, though a flower can receive pollens from different plants, the pollen from the same plant is preferred. Once the pollen grain is deposited on the stigma, it germinates to form a pollen tube. This pollen tube grows right through the style. It contains a tube nucleus and a generative nucleus and reaches the ovary where ovules are located. Through a narrow opening in ovule called micropyle, the pollen tube enters the ovule. Just before entering the ovule, the generative nucleus divides to form two male gametes. Once inside the ovule, the pollen tube releases two male gametes into the embryo sac. The embryo sac contains the egg or female gamete along with the synergids. One of the male gametes successfully unites with the egg, and this process of fusion of the male and female gametes is called fertilization. The product of fertilization is called the zygote. Within the embryo sac are seen two centrally located polar nuclei. The other male gamete fuses with these two polar nuclei to form endosperm nucleus. This process is called triple fusion, as three nuclei are involved in the process: one male gamete and two polar nuclei. Thus, two fusions take place inside the embryo sac, and the whole process is called double fertilization. After fertilization, the ovary develops into a fruit, and the ovules develop into seeds.
Let's look at types of pollination. Now, there are major types of pollination that we have here. We have two types of pollination. We have the self pollination and we have the cross pollination. These are the two major kind of pollination that we have in plants. Let's look at the self pollination. Now, self pollination, as it's written there, this is the transfer of matured pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or to that of another flower of the same plant. So, for example, now we have tomato and pear. So, therefore, self pollination involves only one parent, that is a plant, and usually occur in bisexual flowers or monoecious flower. What this means that when it comes to self pollination, it involves only one parent because it's the transfer of mature pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower. All right, so the flower must be the same. In this case, whether it's the same, whether it's the anther of no, a flower has two parts, like we said earlier. It has the anther and the stigma. The anther contains the male sex gamete, which is the pollen grain, and the stigma contains the ovary and the ovule, which is the female part. So it's either the pollen grain is moving from the anther to the stigma of the same flower on the same plant, or it's moving from the anther to the stigma of the same flower but in another plant. Okay, so that is self pollination, and this one occurs in bisexual flowers. That means flowers that have both the male and the female reproductive organ bearing on the flower. So a flower that has both the male and female reproductive organ is known as what? Bisexual. Bisexual. That's both the male and the female part bearing on the same flower. Let's look at the self pollination. As you can see from here, this is a flower and this is the pollen grain being moved down to the stigma of the same flower, either on the same plant or the same flower on another plant. But the point is that both flower must be the same. All right. Let's look at cross pollination. Then we'll come back to look at that video. As you can see, this one too, this is the same thing. The pollen grain is moving from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. That's why I call it self pollination. So you must move from the stigma, from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Let's move on to the next slide. Let's look at advantages of self pollination. Now, number one, it ensures effective pollination in bisexual flowers. Number two, it avoids wastage of pollen grains. And the disadvantage there is that the production of this particular self pollination, their production is weak, their option is usually weak due to continuous self pollination. So if they keep on pollinating themselves, the result is usually very weak. The flowers are always weak, and the offspring they are less adaptive to the environment because they are coming from the same parents. So it's nothing new. It's nothing new in the offspring. Since they're coming from the same parent, there's nothing new. So whatever issues the parents have, the offspring will also have. So they're not actually adaptive to harsh environments. That is the disadvantage of self-pollinated flowers. Our conditions, let's look at conditions for self-pollinated flowers. Now, there are some conditions that must be in order for self-pollination to take place. Number one, we have what we call the homogamy. Now, homogamy is the ripening of the anther and the stigma of the bisexual flower at the same time. Now, the bisexual flower, like I said earlier, contain both the male reproductive organ and at the same time contain the female reproductive organ. So we call them bisexual flowers. So both of them has to be ripe at the same time. So that is what we refer to as what? Homogamy. It must be harmonized. The female, the stigma must be ripe, the pollen grain and the anther must be what? Must be ripe for self-pollination to take place. Number two, we have the celistogamy. So we have the celistogamy. Now this cleistogamy, or you call it cleistogamy. Cleistogamy, this is when ripe pollen grains are deposited on the stigma, which then becomes ripened at the same time. Now the cleistogamy is when ripe pollen grains from the anther, which is the male sex gamete, a ripe male sex gamete of the plant, which is the pollen grains, are deposited on the stigma, which then becomes ripened at the same time. So the stigma also becomes ripened as soon as the pollen grain is what? A ripened pollen grain is dropped on the stigma. The stigma also has to get ripened too for pollination to take place. So both of them has to be ripe. All right, they has to be what? To be ripe. The pollen grains has to be ripe. The stigma has to be what? To be ripe for self-pollination to take place. Let's look at cross-pollination. Now, this is the transfer of mature pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of a flower on another plant or on a closely related species. So when we say cross pollination, it means the pollen grain from this male part of the flower releases pollen grain and is being transferred to the stigma of another plant. All right, of another plant that's they're of the same or they are closely related. So what it means here, if the pollen grain of a pawpaw flower in A is ripened, so when we say pollination, if there's a transfer from the pollen grain of pawpaw A in the flower here, is sent to the stigma of the flower of a pawpaw flower of B in another plant. That's called cross pollination. So from A to B, from A to B, just like we will see on the diagram soon. So therefore, cross pollination involves two parents and usually occurs in flowers that are unisexual or dioecious flower. Now, cross pollination occurs in flowers that do not have both the male and the female reproductive organ. So some of the flowers they just have only the female reproductive organ, while some just have only the male reproductive organ on the flower. So we call those kind of flowers unisexual, or we call it what? Dioecious flower. So for such flower to pollinate, the one with the male reproductive organ must be able to get close, or must be able to send or transfer the pollen grains to another plant of the same species that has female reproductive organ only. So that's why it has to be a cross, because the particular flower does not have both of them, so they have to be a cross. Let's look at this image to buttress what we are seeing. Let me go back to this image. Now, if you look at the cross pollination, let's look at this one, the first one here. Now, let's assume this is a flower. It has only the male reproductive organ, and this is the male reproductive organ. This particular one, this is the male reproductive organ. This is the female reproductive organ. Let's assume it doesn't have this one. It only have the male, which is this one. Let me clean it and let's see. Let's assume it just have only this one on its flower. Just have only this male. This is the anther. This is the male reproductive organ right there, and this other flower too. Let's assume it does not have the male counterpart. You just only have the female. The female is for the stigma. So this one has the male. This one has the female. So for it to cross pollinate, the pollen grains has to move from this male to the stigma right here, which is the cross pollination. And for this, that both of the flowers has to be the same, all right, or they must be closely related. So for flowers that do not have stigma and anther, that do not have both of them, that do not have both stigma and anther, we call them what? Unisexual flowers. So cross pollination always occur in unisexual flowers. I believe that is understood. So let's look at um let's move on to the next slide as we talk about cross pollination.
This is how we collect pollens. You look for a flower that does not have the petals. All the petals are falling off, and then you start with a brush. So this is my brush. You can see that. Start with the brush. Start with the brush, and you brush it. So I'm putting it in this container. I got my pollens on the brush, so we're going to pollinate the flower now. So the flower is ready to be pollinated. Why? Because it's open, the inner petals. These are the outer petals. It has 3 outer petals, 1, 2, and 3, and 3 inner petals. So I'm just going to put my hand and spread it to reveal the stigma. That is the stigma. You can see the stigma. So I'm rubbing my pollens on it. So this is hand pollination. In some places, ants pollinate or scarab beetles, but the most effective way of pollination is by hand. So this is already covered. So that's the stigma. It has to be covered with pollens. You can see all the pollens. They are no more. And notice it's sticky. You can see it's sticky. Why is it sticky? The stigma has sticky substances on the surface, which allows the pollens to stick naturally. So that's how nature ensures that the pollens stick to the stigma. There you go.
Let's look at the advantages of cross-pollination. Now, for cross-pollination, we have so many advantages that is close to it. Number one, it always produce healthier offspring. And number two, the seeds are viable, which means the seeds, they can germinate in any kind of condition. The seed are always having a tendency to germinate as soon as they are placed in the right condition. The offspring are more adapted to the environment. So the offspring can easily fit into the environment because it's having the DNA of different, plants that came together to pollinate. Number four, there's formation of new varieties with good characteristics. So if plant A that has only the male sex gametes has a good quality, has a good character, it's growing well, and meets with plant B that has only the female reproductive organ and it's also growing well, having a good character and others, the offspring is going to combine both the character of A and B and produce a new variety, which should be good as they grow, which should have a very better character that we become more better than the A and the what and the B combined together. Just having the combination of character A and character B together to create a new variety. Let's look at the disadvantages of cross pollination. Now, for cross pollination, the disadvantage here is that it depends on what external agents such as wind and insects for it to what to pollinate. So we're going to talk about agent in the next slide. Number two, it leads to wastage of pollen grain, especially in wind pollination. So when the wind is blowing, most of the pollen grains are being blown away, and thereby, you know, wasting wasting much amount of the pollen grains for especially for the ones that have only the male sex gametes on it. So these are the disadvantages of cross pollination. So let's look at the features of a cross pollinated flowers. How do we know a cross pollinated flower? Number one, we have what we call dioecious flower. A dioecious flower refers to when male and female flower occur on separate plants. Example we have is the purple. The dioecious flower, when we talk about flower in the first lesson, is when the male and the female flowers occur on separate plants. Now take note, dioecious flower can also be called unisexual flower. So it means they are flower that is either a male or a female, but not both. So they are not both. They don't have the both sex organ, either a male or a female. That is how you can know a cross-pollinated flower. Number two, dichogamy. Dichogamy. Now, when the male and the female parts matured at different time, that is what we refer to as what dichogamy. Dichogamy is a situation whereby the male and the female parts matured at different times. At different times, that we refer to as what dichogamy. And can be divided into a protandry. Protandry. Now, what is protandry? It's when the anther which contain the pollen grains, the male sex gamete, matures or ripen before the stigma, which is the female counterpart. So protandry is when the anther matures or ripen before the stigma. That is what we refer to as what? Protandry. Example is sunflower okra, and cotton. Now, the dichogamy can also be protogeny. It can also be what? Protogeny. Now, protogeny simply means when the stigma matures before the anther. When the stigmas mature before the anther. This is can be found in palm, oil palm, and figs. In this case, is the female sex organ matured first before the male. In such case, it's called protogeny. And also, other features again you can use to locate or to know this is a cross-pollinated flower is that they possess brightly colored petals to attract insects. The petals are always brightly colored, and the petals are those things that attract insects that makes those plants to look so beautiful. Some can be brightly red, some can be brightly white, some can be brightly golden yellow, and others. Those petals they attract what insects for pollination. Those are examples of what cross. Those are features of what a cross-pollinated flower. Number D, letter D, they possess sweet smell for attracting insects. So they possess sweet smell odor to attract insects so that the insects can help them to what pollinate. Because once the insects are attracted, they go and look for nectar. Nectar is a sweet juice that is found in the flower, and once they perch on the flower, some of the pollen grains are stick or get stuck to the fur or to the body of the insect. And once the insect is through, when they fly to on that flower that has the female counterpart, you shake it off. So when the pollen grains fall off from the insects and rest on the stigma and thereby cross pollinating them. So for them to attract insects, most of them have this sweet smell, this sweet scent to attract insects. Now, most of the next feature is that all cross-pollinated flowers they are unisexual. I've said that earlier before. They are either male or female, but they are not both of them at the same time. They're either male or female. But they can be both. They can be both, either male or female. So you call them unisexual. You call them what? Dioecious flower. Number 6 or F, they have what we call self-incompatibility. Cross-pollinated flowers have what we call self-incompatibility. It's not all cross-pollinated flower that can actually pollinate themselves. Are you getting it, sir? So they cannot pollinate together except they have the same flower. So if the pollen grain of a pawpaw go and rest on that of okra, there's no way it can pollinate because the flower of pawpaw is there from the flower of what? Of okra. So they cannot actually what pollinate. They cannot fertilize to bring new seed. All right, that's why you cannot see a tree that has pawpaw and okra at the same time. They cannot pollinate because they are not closely related. They are not related at all. So they are incompatible. They are incompatible. Next, we have the position of the anthers and the stigma. So one way to know a cross-pollinated flower is the way the position of the anther is, and the way the position of the stigma is. So the position of the anther and the stigma is one way we can use to know a cross-pollinated flower. Let's look at agents of pollination. Now, these agents of pollination are very, very key when it comes to pollination because without them, we cannot be able to have our flowers, our fruits, and our seeds. Now, what are agents of pollination? Now, another word for agents of pollination is usually called pollinators. You can call them pollinators. Now, they are organisms which help in the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of flowers. And these pollinators include birds, insects, bats, snails, and man. And also, the agents can also be a non-living thing. It can be like wind and what? Water. So all these are agents of pollination that helps to us to pollinate our plants. We also have fruits and seeds. As you can see, the birds, the snail, the bats, and others, all these they feed on plants and thereby taking some of the pollen grains and helping in what? In transferring them from one place to another. Now we have two major agents of pollination. We have two major agents of pollination. The agent of pollination can be broken down into two major ones. They can be insects or wind. And the popular one we have here is the bee. The bee is a very, very important insect that is required in area of what? Pollination. And also the wind also, as you can see, this is a traders plant. You see the wind blowing off these pollen grains and they go and rest on the stigma of another plant, thereby causing pollination. So the major agents of pollinations are what? The wind and the insects and the wind. Let's look at some characteristics of some pollinated plants or flowers. Let's look at some features or characteristics of some insect pollinated flowers. So any flower that is pollinated by insects, we call it what? Insects pollinated flowers, or we call it what? Entomophilous flower. Or we call it what? Entomophilous flower. These are flowers that are what? Pollinated by what? By insects. So how do we know a flower that is pollinated by insects? Number one, they have large conspicuous petals and sepals. Their petals are always large. Why is it large? It's just to attract the insects. Same thing, their sepals are always large. We talk about petals and sepals in parts of flower in the lesson one. They're always large to attract these insects. Number two, they have bright coloration. They're always bright. The coloration of the petals are always bright. When you look at them, they're so beautifully bright. Usually the sunflower, the red rose, the hibiscus flower, they're always bright. The color of the flower are always bright just to attract insects. Number three, possession of scents. Some have beautiful scents that attracts insects. For example, now the rose have a beautiful scent that is so pleasant that can attract insects. When you perceive it, the scent is so nice. So they attract insects with scent. They have possession of scent. Number four, presence of nectar. Nectar is a sweet juice that is found inside the flower, and this is what the bee usually go for, where they usually suck it up to make up the honey which we have, which we usually take regularly. So they have sweet nectar. It's like a sweet juice. It's called nectar. Number five, presence of rough, sticky, and relatively few pollen grains. And the pollen grains on these insect pollinated flowers or the entomophilous flowers, the pollen grains are rough, they are sticky because they have to stick to the insects, and they are not much, they are always few. They are always few. They are always few. And number six, they have flatty, sticky stigma to receive pollen grains. The stigma of the insect pollinated flower, the stigma is always sticky so as to what? To receive, they are flat and sticky so as to be able to receive the pollen grains that is dumped on them so that they won't fall off. They're sticky. Then number seven, the entomophilous flowers include hibiscus flower. Now the hibiscus flower is what you use for your zobo. If in case you don't know, that is what you use for your zobo. The zobo we drink, they are from hibiscus flower. We have the cotularia, that is the crotalaria. We have the pride of Barbados. These are examples of what? Entomophilous flowers or insect pollinated flowers. Next, we have the characteristics of the wind pollinated flowers. So I told you we have the two major ones, the insect pollinated flowers and the wind pollinated flowers. Now let's look at the features or characteristics of what? Wind pollinated flowers, and it's called the anemophilous flower. Anemophilous flower. Anemophilous flower, or it's called the wind pollinated flower. So take note of that. Let's look at the features of this. Number one, they have small inconspicuous petals and sepals, unlike the insect pointed flowers. For the wind pointed flowers, their petals and sepals are very small. All right, they are very small. Number two, they have dull colored flowers. These are the way you can notice it's a wind pollinated flowers. The flowers are always dull colored. They don't have scent. That is number three. Absent of scent, absent of nectar. Number four, and they have large quantity of pollen grains. Unlike the insect pollinated flowers, this one has large quantity of what? Pollen grains. And number six, the pollen grains are small, lightly sticky. All right, the pollen grains are small, lightly sticky, not too sticky like that, like the insect one, but it's just lightly sticky. Number seven, elongated sticky stigma with large surface area. And the stigma is always longer, projecting out of the flower like an antenna, and on the top of it is a very wide, flat surface that can accept many pollen grains. Examples include cereals like maize, guinea corn, and rice. All right. So just to make a recap, we just talk about the pollination. We talk about the definition of pollination. We saw the conditions that are necessary for pollination. We saw that um, we have two major pollination, which is the self and cross pollination, and we saw the definition of self pollination. Like we said, is the transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or to that of another flower that is closely related, and we saw the advantages, we saw the disadvantages of self-pollinated flower. Look at the cross-pollinated flower here. So it sees from the pollen grain down to the stigma of another flower. That is for cross-pollination. It's from the pollen grain from one flower to the stigma of another flower. So these are what we've discussed so far in this lesson. And please, you have to draw this particular diagram that is right here. You have to draw this particular diagram that is right here. We'll be able to draw this particular diagram, right? So it's mandatory that you need to know to draw the flower and label the flower very, very well. So we talk about cross-pollination. We saw the advantages and we saw the disadvantages. And right here, we also see the features of a cross-pollinated flowers. And also we look at the agents of pollination, which includes the birds, the bats, the man, and others. I also saw that the two major pollinations are insects and wind, and we see the difference between the insect pollinated flower, which is called the entomophilous flower, and we saw the wind pollinated flower, which is called the anemophilous flower. So we've come to the end of this lesson, and this is exercise for you. What is pollination? Okay, what is pollination? Explain what you understand by self and cross pollination. What are the features of self and cross pollination? So you can do this in tabular form. You can give me 5 each for this. State 5 characteristics each for entomophilous and anemophilous flowers. What are the agents of pollination? All right. So we've come to the end of this lesson, and we're going to attach other questions to it at the end of this lesson. See you next time and remain blessed. Make sure you go through this lesson, pause the video you play, and make sure you read this. This is the only way you can take this from the phone or from your tab down up to your head. God bless you. Stay blessed. I remember Mr. Francis. Bye bye.